Welcome into Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolfe and Gavin Schall here, and there's been a lot of work to do on this offseason guard primer. Arguably one of the more important positions that the Knicks need to look to address during this offseason. And Gavin, today we are finishing off our series on offseason guard targets with potential trade targets.
Yeah, there's a certain disgruntled guy in Utah you may have heard about. It is not Rudy Gobert that the Knicks could be targeting. And then two young stars in Oklahoma City and San Antonio that might pique the Knicks' interest. All that and more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome into Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We want to thank you guys, too, for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your podcast platform of choice or if you're checking out our faces on YouTube every day. We appreciate you guys taking in Locked On Knicks as one of the first things you do every single day. And I am Alex Wolfe. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. He is Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And Gavin, you referred to our first trade target as disgruntled in the open there. I think our boss, David Locke, if earlier this season is any indication, would say, no, he's very gruntled, to quote Michael Scott. Yeah. There's nothing to worry about with Donovan Mitchell, but
I was hoping you were going to phrase it that way.
Yeah, I was, you and I, we've watched enough of The Office that we never cease to let a reference pass us by. But yeah, I mean, that's the first guy we want to talk about today, right? And it's the case is being made more interesting, and there's already been, I believe, some reporting out there. There's been sort of loose reporting out there for a while now that if Utah sort of flames out again and this Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert built team doesn't prove that they can have success in the playoffs, that, Mitchell might be the guy that would look to, make his way out of Utah. As again, I will paraphrase our boss, David Locke, with like, why the hell would he want to go to New York? If he's trying to find more playoff success, why go to the team that's only made the playoffs like once in the last 10 years? That's not wrong, but certainly of all the teams that Mitchell could potentially look to go to, there are not too many with more connections to his life than the Knicks, which is to say he grew up in the area. His dad has worked for the Mets since forever, and Mitchell is a huge Mets guy. And also, there's just he's from the area, which is a big thing. And also Leon Rose, has a connection with him as well, which you could say about a number of different guys around the league, but none that are in a situation where they would potentially want to get out more so than Mitchell. I think of any of those guys that Rose at the star level has those connections with. We've talked a lot about, potential point guards and guys of that ilk so far. There's not really too many other than maybe the final guy we'll talk about, who's obviously a point guard, but maybe a lot less available, that really fit that pure point guard mold. But I think you could just kind of have Mitchell run the offense with RJ Barrett if that's the direction you want to go. If Julius Randle is still around too, then maybe that's, a three-headed monster of guys that can all sort of handle the ball and run the offense on any given possession. And, obviously he's awesome. His resume speaks for itself. But Gavin, I think the big question is, will the Knicks be able to match the price that Utah will want for him, as he won't really have that much power as far as forcing his way specifically like to the Knicks. He might be able to give Utah a list and they could honor it, but they're still going to feel the bidding war because he has a lot of years left on his contract. And then it's what he would cost worth it. I guess that's the other imperative question. How are you feeling? I know we talked about him a number of times, but how are you feeling about Donovan Mitchell in a potential trade right now?
Yeah, I'll throw another Michael Scott quote at you. Poopin', you know how I be. Because that was Donovan Mitchell the first 3 games of this series, right? He was awful. You look at the statistics, and of course he's a brilliant scorer of the basketball, but in terms of playing a winning game, and I think trying to drive his team towards success. Like defensively, I mean, you could throw this in Mike Conley too, but he's an excuse because he's old. Like he's been pathetic in this series, and things perked up obviously in Game 4 a little bit, but before that, he just looked so disinterested. And it's this weird because I always think of him in terms of the him versus Devin Booker comparison. As a Knicks fan and a Suns fan, that was like the internet discourse about Mitchell. It was like, who's better between those two guys? And like people making the case that's ridiculous that people considered Booker better. And then Chris Paul came into Devin Booker's life, and all of a sudden he was pretty locked in defensively. He made another step on offense. And I always was of the opinion that Mitchell had higher highs, but Booker was just a steadier player. And I think the gap between them has increased even more. And it's this weird thing with Mitchell where you're sort of left questioning, all right, in the right context, is he something more than he currently is? Because physically, he is that's what he was known for coming out of Louisville, right? Like he was supposed to be a stopper, and hopefully the offense would be there and be really good. But this guy who's built to the nines, has a 6'11" wingspan, as athletic as essentially anyone in the NBA. He's become a better passer. I mean, he's not a consistent passer, but some of the best ones he throws are ones that 5 to 10 guys on earth can throw. Like the overhead hook passes 22 feet on a line are just insane, and they make you think that there's more there with him. He's gotten a lot more efficient from 2-point range. I think this was the first year he shot over 45% on field goals in his NBA career, and he's only 25 years old. So there's a case to be made that, like, yes, this is absolutely the dude the Knicks should go all in on, but I have some pause. I'm not as gung-ho as I was a couple months ago watching him in this postseason. And I get his frustration because Utah's basically been running back the same broken thing for 4 straight years. And I do think he could be enlivened by coming to New York. But he's, to David Locke's right point, he's going to have the same responsibilities in New York that he's going to have in Utah. He doesn't get to slide in as the number 2. He doesn't get to slot in next to a Chris Paul to balance the scales for him. Like, he has to be that dude, even if RJ Barrett makes a leap. And we've seen mixed results from that, or at the very least, an inability to play 2 ways. If I'm New York, though, I think you ultimately probably have to go all in on someone like that, because this is what we talk about with Zion, too, when we talk about with all these guys. You're never going to get the perfect dude, right? LeBron James at age 24 isn't available for a trade. Kevin Durant at 22 isn't available for a trade. There's going to be some pop marks on whatever diamond you go after. You just have to pick which one of those slightly flawed diamonds you're going to go all in on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think with Mitchell too, the main thing that's worrying me more so than the skill set, like I think he's obviously very talented, but I think the thing that gives me the most pause is, even for a 25-year-old that can score 25 points per game easily, and has proven that in his career to this point, that other than this postseason has actually had, I mean, individually at least a good amount of postseason success, at least scoring the basketball. And being like the engine of a playoff team. I think the cost is what is really, making me think, how do they get this done? And the calculus on a potential Mitchell trade has just changed so much since like this time last year. This time last year, you're thinking, all right, well, Julius Randle was 2nd team All NBA. Obviously, that's the guy. It would be really painful, but, maybe you centerpiece an RJ Barrett to Utah and get back Donovan Mitchell and, build around a Mitchell and Julius Randle core. And now it's sort of like, well, now Randle's kind of on the outs, and had himself a terrible year and seemed like he sort of grew disconnected from the team and seems like probably the most likely guy to get traded on the Knicks this coming offseason. So can you center a package around Julius Randle, who would be viewed as a talent, but almost more viewed as a salary in this negotiation, or a guy to be rerouted somewhere else to get more assets to Utah if they choose to kind of rebuild here? And then how much more of the young talent on the Knicks are you going to have to give up to make up for the fact that now the plan is shifted from pairing, a Donovan Mitchell with a Julius Randle to pairing him with an RJ Barrett, who you'll now want to keep pretty much at all costs? How much more talent and or draft picks are you going to have to include? And does that become worth it then to gut your team for this guy who, as the best player on his current Utah team, especially even in a depleted West this year, facing a Luka Doncic-less Dallas Mavericks, at least for the first 3 games, couldn't get it done and hasn't been able to get it done. Is it worth it? And that's kind of my My sticking point, and I'm honestly at this point, again, based off the new math that we're dealing with here, where RJ is no longer a potential centerpiece, I'm starting to kind of not want to trade for him as much.
No, I think it's a fair point, and I guess I could make a case given where I put those guys respectively in my Knicks Young Guns rankings that the move is maybe to just make RJ Barrett the centerpiece and throw in a couple picks, and who knows if that's the top offer Utah would get, but if it is, like, call it a day there. And see what you have with a Mitchell, Emmanuel Quickly, Obi Toppin, Cam Reddish, Quentin Grimes, plus a draft pick group. That sounds pretty appealing to me. But I know there are some people that, and understandably, like you're saying, RJ is completely invested. There's none of the questions of, and like, again, I don't want to put too much on Mitchell because I just can't say I know enough about his situation in Utah to really comment on it. But with RJ, there's just like no question about his commitment. There's no question about his commitment to being a two-way guy, even though he was very iffy at points defensively this year. I don't know. I think there's a case to be made that if you're the Knicks and you're looking down the barrel of that deal, maybe you'd rather trade RJ than be in like every future draft asset that you have. But I don't know. It's an interesting conversation. Maybe a similar one that we're going to have about our next guy, Shai-Gilgeous Alexander. But first, Alex, if you want to play like these guys, or at least up to your highest potential, there's only one drink, one supplement out there that gets you all the way home, and that is AG1. Our next partner, they have a product that I use every single day, and of course, I'm talking about AG1. I started using it because I was tired of having to take a million different supplements every day to feel good, and there were just all these different things. Like, got to get a vitamin B in, got to get a zinc in, got to get some other stuff if I want to feel extra good. AG1 covers it all and makes it so much easier. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all the things. I personally love to take it. Sometimes I'll go before a workout, but recently I've been doing it right before a broadcast because I find it gives me like that extra bit of pep that you want when you're calling a game, and that little extra bit of focus too, both of which are extremely helpful. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy free, or gluten free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. And it supports better sleep quality, which I love. They have over 7,000 5-star reviews. And another cool thing, if you care about the stuff that I do, Athletic Greens is a climate neutral certified company. So that is awesome. For every purchase, they donate to organizations helping to get nutritious food to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the U.S. So right now it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NBA Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NBA Network to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So, Alex, I just mentioned him, but let's get into it. Shai-Gilgeous Alexander, maybe the least available guy on this list, maybe the most available guy on this list. Who knows what Sam Presti is thinking these days? It's a little bit of a clown show in Oklahoma City, while simultaneously they also have one of the best futures in the NBA, and I'm a little bit jealous of it. So weird dynamic there. But there's no real direction in terms of whether they're saying, all right, next year's the year, we're going to throw some of these chips in, we're going to build a real team, or let's just see if we can milk this another 4 or 5 seasons and end up with 1,000 draft picks.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, like, if I was a betting man, I think they're going to do the same thing next year, because Presti's ultimate goal, I think, is Victor Wembanyama out of France. The, like, 7'3", I think, just freak athlete, like, plays like a wing guy who's 7'3", is like basically like what every Knicks fan talked themselves into Kristaps Porzingis being. It seems like that's what Presti's goal is. And so, I don't know that Presti would go in being like, I want to trade Shai-Gilgeous Alexander, but I wonder if Shai-Gilgeous Alexander has the patience to deal with another Presti season, because Presti already, during his like 3-hour long, postseason press conference, said, like, he got asked pretty much point blank, like, are you going to tank again next year? And he was like, well, we'll take an assessment. And if at any given point we think that there's not really much to play for anymore, we won't play for much anymore, which is essentially to say if they get 20 games in and they're 5-15 again, they're just going to start shutting guys down intermittently again and doing sort of the same thing that they've been doing for these last like 3 years. And just sort of blatantly playing the system and losing as many games as they can. And, if that's how they want to do it, it's not the first time in NBA history that a team has done it. It's maybe they're maybe gunning for the most egregious example of it since like Hinkie's Sixers in pursuit of one particular player. But, if you're a Shai-Gilgeous Alexander and you're in your early 20s, but you've strung together like some really good seasons and look like you can be an actual star, are you going to finally just lose your patience and say to your agent, like, get me out of here? I mean, I'm not going to waste another year of my burgeoning prime not playing, and not competing for something, especially after he got to taste, some measure of postseason, his first 2 seasons in the league. He made the playoffs with the Clippers and then made the playoffs with the Thunder that first year with Chris Paul. And since then has not gotten to do anything close to that as Presti has sort of kicked the tank in the full gear. So I think that's the main factor is, does Shai want out? And if he does, will Presti just acquiesce and say, all right, we'll find you a way out of here? And then, you look at the landscape around the league and the Knicks are pretty well equipped to make a bid for a guy like that and offer up some players to the Thunder that would, be productive players for them, but maybe wouldn't influence winning as much as Shai, on an individual level. So that could be a selling point. They have a couple extra draft picks that they could throw the Thunder's way as well. So maybe they become a good landing spot as Shai starts hitting his prime, hitting his max contract years, and, hitting the time where you want to see him lead a team. But I will say this, and, I'll throw it to you, Gavin, as far as when we start brainstorming like a potential package here, like Shai did for one reason or another, be it legitimate injuries, be it the fact that he was taken out of rhythm so many times by being sat for such extended periods. But he did have sort of a down year this year shooting the ball, only shot like 30% from 3. Seemed to take a bit of a step back from last year, not dissimilar to like a Julius Randle, but maybe not as stark, on the effort level and impact on winning and stuff. But, there's a case to be made that he could potentially become available for less than like a Donovan Mitchell and maybe be a better deal for actually a younger player that arguably has better intangibles as far as size and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think I don't see Oklahoma City letting him go. Like, to me, of these 3 guys, he's probably the least likely to get dealt. The one ray of light is, I think Presti sort of prides himself on being very accommodating to players and maintaining really good relationships with agents to some extent or another. Maybe I'm off on that. That's the feel at least I've gotten the last few years with some of the buyouts, like when they've gotten guys like an Al Horford or a Kemba Walker and have eventually sent them to better destinations. But he is a hell of a talent, man. I mean, he's as good as anyone, if not better than anyone, at getting to the rim. Incredibly good at finishing once he gets there. Until this year, to your point, he's been a very solid 3-point shooter, solid defensively. I'm just a massive fan of the guy's game. It's like aesthetically, it's a little weird. He plays it like a pace and has a start and stop that I don't think I've ever seen from anyone else playing basketball, but it works. And I think it lends itself to him aging really well. I would totally go all in on him. I wonder what the package is. I mean, maybe it is, again, just the idea that he has the ultimate ability to navigate the draft. But I do wonder if there's a little bit of reticence from Presti there, because he's collected like this pile of gold, right? Like early Facebook stock, Bitcoin, however you want to frame it. But I'm wondering if it's not degrading in value a little bit, because we all remember last year there were all these rumors, and I think it did probably happen, that he tried to make a big swing and move up from 5 to get to number 1 to draft Cade Cunningham, presumably, or maybe Evan Mobley, maybe Jalen Green, who knows who they wanted. And he wasn't able to do it despite having, again, a million trillion picks. And I'm wondering if at a certain point there are diminishing returns to acquiring all those picks. And if there are, I don't really see any reason for him to sort of deconsolidate talent by turning a Shai-Gilgeous Alexander into an Emmanuel Quickley, an Obi Toppin, or even into an RJ Barrett. I think if anything, the move for them is to start going the other way and start putting some of these pieces together, some combination of the young guys and all the picks they have into better players. To me, it would be counterintuitive to break down a good player into two, like, maybe really talented but lesser pieces. Then again, a lot of what they've done the last couple of years is counterintuitive, so who knows?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I think only time will tell, but I feel like I do feel like, there is something to what you said about Presti being or wanting to be at least, a player friendly general manager, despite like I think he wants to be like the player friendly Sam Hinkie in a way, at least with what he's doing right now. You know what I mean? Like Hinkie kind of got knocked for treating players a little too much like, like actual assets. I know we use the term assets all the time, but like treating them like they were just sort of like pawns on his chessboard, And I think that Hinkie wants to Presti wants to sort of, not be that guy and still be able to have good relationships. So that when the time comes, he hasn't burned so many bridges through his tanking and how he's treated players and everything that like things sort of fall apart. Like they did for, I guess the Sixers, they've made the playoffs a number of years in a row and now they're sitting pretty good. But,
but things personally fell apart for Hinkie.
Yes, exactly. Where he sort of just, lost faith in, from the ownership and everything else. And it seemed like did not have a great rep around the league. So,
and notably has not been hired since then.
Exactly. So I think if Presti, if this whole thing comes together, I think it'll come together very quickly. But it's going to be just a matter of, I think it all comes down to Shai-Gilgeous Alexander, basically, and how he feels. And if he has a conversation with them that he doesn't feel is productive to him going forward and how the team's motivations are going to be, I think he might ask out. But maybe he's okay with how things have been going and is willing to play the long game and say, look, you guys signed me to my max, so I'm making my money no matter what. I'll still be here. If you get Wembanyama, I'll still be on the team. And then we could go try to run it with, me and him and Giddey and all the other guys. Maybe they get Chet Holmgren.
Lineup of all time there.
Yeah, I mean, just like super tall, super crazy, talented lineup. That'll be their whole thing. But at any rate, if anybody wants to get big and tall and strong like the future Oklahoma City Thunder starting lineup that I just predicted, you guys can always get some Built Bars. And you guys know how it goes. Built Bars are the best tasting protein bars on the market. They look like a candy bar. They taste like a candy bar. They will not give you all the guilt of a candy bar. However, you don't have to deal with all the calories and fat and sugar and everything else that comes with eating a candy bar, because Built Bars are pretty good for you. They have just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs compared to a whopping 17 grams of protein per bar. They come in so many delicious flavors. And if you haven't tried them yet, you can check out Built Puffs, which are, I don't know how to put this any more enticingly, a chocolate-covered protein marshmallow that just reminds you of like a Malamar or something. I don't even know. It like blew my mind the first time I ate one. It's like almost like a Three Musketeers sort of, in that it's just so light and fluffy, but is giving you all that protein and tastes really sweet. You would think there's a lot more than 4 grams of sugar in it, but there's not. It's just it blows the mind. I can't describe Built Puffs any better, but I will tell you the flavors. They've got churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, and other special edition flavors that come out from time to time. They're just so good. Some of my favorite Built Bars are Puffs, so definitely check those out if you haven't already. If you want to get some Built Bars for yourself, go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you can get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, Gavin, so our final trade target here, I would say this is probably the most unlikely guy to me, but, none of these guys are super likely. They're kind of moonshots, but they're the guys I think that, this is the caliber of player that I think the Knicks are really going to target if they're going after guys in trade at this point, because they've accumulated the young players, they've accumulated the extra draft picks. This is the type of move they got to go for. But Dejounte Murray is our final guy on the Spurs. Just had a career year, averaged nearly a triple-double, made his first All-Star team. It was just awesome. It helped drag the Spurs to, a play-in appearance. And, they ultimately didn't make it in off of that, but I thought that, he had a great season individually and really took a step forward. He still struggles shooting the three. He's definitely not a shooter at this point, but he's so dynamic off the dribble. He's so fast. He's great at reading the floor. A really great rebounder. He's got great size for a point guard, and he is, unlike the other two guys on this list, if you are of the belief that the Knicks need a point guard and that Emmanuel Quickley is not that guy that you want to trot out there to start a point guard next year, Dejounte Murray, as far as pure point guards go, is probably the guy on this list, and maybe one of the only guys that could potentially become available. Although he himself is also locked up to a contract for a couple more years. I worry, Gavin, that he would cost way too much like I've sort of said about some of the other guys on this list. I know you want to get something in the NBA, you got to give up something. It's not, nobody's going to line up to be like, here, New York Knicks, just like take this player that is really talented. And in Murray's case, super underpaid. He's only going to be making not quite 18 million at the top dollar amount of his contract, which stretches, I believe, another 3 years after this year. There's no reason for the Spurs to just be like, let's just give this guy up for nothing because we feel like it. So he's going to cost something, and he would need to be motivated to get out of there as well, and ask for a trade. But we have seen the Spurs are also a team that they're not really interested in entertaining having a guy on the team that doesn't want to be there. So presumably, if Murray does ask out, they will probably honor it, and look for the best option for him. But he's probably going to cost a mint because of that affordable contract and his career high production. And the fact that just like the other two guys on this list, he is 25 years old, so he's in the 25 or under club. I don't think it's super likely, Gavin, but how aggressive would you be if you were the Knicks in going after a guy like Dejounte, if he would become available?
Yeah, I think, so here's the thing. It all comes down to whether or not Greg Popovich retires for me, because I think if he stays on, they'll have no interest in taking a step back. I mean, they've shown that the last couple of years, despite, once the big three all retired, like that was the red light should have gone off, and they should have basically done what Oklahoma City is doing. Maybe not quite as egregiously, but similar, right? And they never did that because they said, all right, we have arguably the greatest coach of all time. We're going to compete and we're going to fight as hard as we possibly can. I think Pop said it himself in an interview. He's like, tanking probably would have been smarter than what we've done, but I don't really know how to do that. But in a post-Pop world, maybe they bring back someone like Will Hardy comes in and is the head coach, or just some young mind around the NBA, kind of like Mark Daigneault in Oklahoma City, and I have a feeling that is the direction that they would ultimately go. And in that world, you say, look, Dejounte Murray is awesome, but he's a guy who should be the final piece on a team that's ready to compete at a higher level. He shouldn't necessarily be the fulcrum of a rebuilding effort, only because I think they'll want to go after that Wembanyama sweepstakes, and they'll want to strive to get the number one pick, or at the very least a top 3, 4, 5 pick in next year's draft that looks like it could potentially be very good. So I think in that world, they'd be open to trading him, and maybe they'd be open to doing it for just a ton of draft picks and someone like an Emmanuel Quickley, who they can sort of sell themselves on, like obviously not in the same universe as Murray as a defender, not nearly as advanced as a passer, but maybe someone with, like, maybe this is crazy to say, but I would argue maybe a slightly higher ceiling, and that plus a whole lot of picks and maybe a Grimes or an Obi thrown in is enough to get it done. And if you're the Knicks, you kind of have to look at that and you say, all right, where are we going with Dejounte Murray? So maybe it's a point well placed by you that for both sides, it just doesn't really make sense. But the dude is a heck of a player. I think the first guy in NBA history to average 20 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds, and 2 steals per game in a season. And I think he would give the Knicks a little bit more of that identity that they are so desperately searching for. The other way this goes is we saw the Spurs have a reclamation project in DeMar DeRozan when they traded Kawhi Leonard. Could they have interest in a similar type of deal where it's Julius Randle and, again, a million draft picks? Obviously, in that world, the Knicks probably do it in a second.
Yeah, it's funny. You said, like, oh, maybe you're right. But I think you sort of talked me into it, actually.
Oh,
like,
sure.
it does kind of make sense in the sense of, like, even Pop might be on board with, Spurs management might not be like, no, they'll be like, no, we want to send you off right. But Pop might be like, the best send off for me at this point would be, look, just give me what you give me, and maybe I'll guide him to a play-in or something, or maybe things will go terrible. But, no matter what, like, there is something to be said. Like, Wembanyama is probably going to be one of those, like, Tim Duncan level prospects, that like, if you can win that lottery, you might set your franchise up for another 20 years again. And like, the Spurs are traditionally a very like foreign player friendly squad. Like, they've had a lot of, foreign players with a lot of levels of success there. Wembanyama being French, obviously his countryman, Tony Parker, made a career in San Antonio that was like a Hall of Fame level career. Like, that there's probably going to be something to that, if they can get him there, that he might, look at that as his forever home, and be like, I just want to be a Spur for life because I like this organization and I like what they do and all this and how they treat foreign players and everything else. So maybe next year is the time for the Spurs to just kind of be like, all right, cool. We've had our fun, but like, clearly this is going nowhere. And if we keep trying to just kind of like tread water, we're not going to really do the franchise any good, and it might be more advantageous to just sort of sell high on Murray after the best season of his career and, get back in Emmanuel quickly or something. And, if I'm the Knicks, it would be painful. I mean, I love Quickly too, as a fan. It would be devastating because I'd be like, damn, we were just seeing this guy start to like really put it together to end this year. But Murray's a guy that has already put it together. There's no doubt about it. He's well put together at this point. I don't think they would go for something like a Julius Randle because I think, to your point, if they decide to make this move, that means they're finally just embracing like, all right, let's just try to find our next Tim Duncan at this point, and we'll trust our scouting staff and our Spurs culture and everything else. And if it means that Pop's last few years are spent just kind of mentoring some youth players, then so be it too. It is what it is at that point. For the good of the franchise. But yeah, it's an intriguing one. Like I said, I came into this thinking like, oh, not super likely, but I think you actually talked me into it. Like, I think there's a world where the Spurs might consider this if they're willing to finally take that plunge and just rip the Band-Aid off and say, look, we've tried 6 different ways to extend, the magic of the Tim Duncan era, for a little longer, but that's all gone at this point. There's no more DeRozan, there's no more LaMarcus Aldridge, there is a Dejounte Murray, but he by himself is not going to usher them into that next era, but might also keep them along with Pop just good enough to avoid, a high lottery pick. So I maybe at this point they just decide, okay, it's time to move on and time to just deal Murray while the going's good and try their luck at hitting a top prospect in next year's pretty talented draft, from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great note to end on. And in turn, it's time for us to move on. We will wrap up our summer point guard primer. If you missed any of the previous episodes, we've gone a whole lot of different directions. We, of course, talked about Emmanuel Quickly and Deuce McBride and everyone currently on the team. Alex did an incredible show talking about potential draft options, specifically focused in on Dyson Daniels. If you missed that, certainly go check it out. Over the weekend, I got to talk to Nick Engstad and Chris Manning of both of the Locked On Podcast Network about point guards on the teams that they cover, Jalen Brunson and Colin Sexton. And you just listened to this one. So you're all caught up. Congratulations. We will move forward with other positions. We will have a cool guest on this week. That'll be a lot of fun. And a whole lot more to look forward to on Locked On Knicks. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Throw us some comments. Throw us some likes. Certainly keep listening to the podcast in audio form as well. And we will talk to you soon. But until then, be good. Peace out.